Hi, I'm Steve Wilson, psychologist and founder of the World Laughter Tour, here with another tip about how to become super humor powered. That means how to use humor to embrace life and make it more rich and healthy and rewarding. Today's topic is perspective. Let's look at some examples. Here's a classic. Have you seen this, called The Young Princess and the Old Woman? When you look at this, what do you see? If you see a young woman, then this is her necklace, and this is her ear, and she's sort of looking away from us. If you see an old woman, then this is the old woman's mouth, and this becomes her nose. And if you look at it long enough, it switches back and forth. Can you see that change back and forth? How about this one? This is pretty famous. Do you see two silhouettes, people facing each other, their noses almost touching? Or do you see a candlestick, or maybe it's a chalice of some kind? And this one is kind of fun. It's a little more complex. I like this one. What do you see? Do you see that chalice? Do you see a candlestick? Do you see an old man and an old woman looking at each other? Or do you see a senorita sitting comfortably being serenaded by a senor with a guitar? And maybe there's more in there if we keep looking. I'll leave it there a second so you can look for some of those things. And here's a variation on that I think really drives the point home. Here's the old woman. But what if we decide to look at this another way? What if we look at it like this? The young princess. Very easy to see. How do you like my AV? Pretty good? Anyway, good, bad, young, old, beautiful, ugly, delicious, awful, wonderful, terrific, not so good. These are all value judgments. They're not absolutes. And the only way you can possibly understand them is to understand the values of the person who's making the judgment. It's easy to recognize that when we say beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Or it's just a matter of taste. When we have that recognition, we become more tolerant of differences. We understand that people have different opinions and preferences and tastes and values. But what does that have to do with superhumor power? Well, when you have superhumor power, the whole world becomes more tolerant, and it makes your life more enjoyable. Humor is a perspective, a way of seeing things. It's impossible to find anything that's funny to everybody, or that everyone will laugh at to the exact same extent. When you have superhumor power, you broaden your perspective because you add senses of humor to your repertoire, and you see the funny a lot more. But you don't expect everyone to laugh at the same joke or the same thing. By contrast, humor-impaired people don't seem to know this. They get upset when you don't laugh at their joking. They might even blame you for not having a sense of humor, but when you have superhumor power, you learn to say, you know, I have a pretty good sense of humor, but that just wasn't funny to me now. One of the ways that humor works, especially in the face of adverse situations, is by creating something called psychological distance, another way of looking at things. You look at all sides of a situation and you'll come to one side that's not as serious as the others, and we're going to call that the lighter side. Imagine if my hand represents a problem, and I have this problem, and I become concerned about the problem, and I study the problem. I get so involved, I get so wrapped up in my problem that it's all I can see. It's big, it's huge, and I can't see anything else. When I can make a joke, when I can get some psychological perspective, when I can find the lighter side, I start to get distance. As the hand gets more distant, I can see you. I can see resources that can help me maybe solve this problem. It's not as big. It doesn't loom as large when I have perspective, when I have distance. It's the same hand, but I have a different perspective about it. It's a terrific way of looking at things. In 1992, our son Sean moved to South Florida to work in the city of Homestead. A month later, that area was devastated by Hurricane Andrew. According to Wikipedia, it's the most destructive hurricane in United States history, and its greatest impact was in South Florida, and it went right through the city of Homestead, a Category 5 hurricane with 177-mile-an-hour winds. It obliterated entire blocks of home. 25,000 houses were destroyed. A few months after the hurricane, my wife and I visited Sean in the devastated area. We took a little tour, and we came to a house that was totally shattered, with only the cinder block walls still standing. The landscape around the house was rubble, looked like something from another planet. The doors and windows were gone. The contents had been sucked out. The roof was completely missing, and the homeowner had the presence of mind or grabbed onto some superhuman power in the moment and spray painted the front wall with the words, "Open house." That is a superhuman power moment. Locating and finding that within yourself won't solve all the problems. It may just help you maintain your sanity, though, by helping you maintain your perspective so you can deal with the situation. So the phoenix can rise from the ashes. And I think that the reason the phoenix rises from the ashes is because it wants to live to laugh another day. Let's look at another illustration. Here's a cartoon. Fella's falling in love with the shadow that he sees. When he comes to reality, he's going to see that it's a mop. Have you ever had something that looked good at first turn out to be not so good? Have you ever had something that looked bad at first to turn out to be not so bad? Maybe even an advantage. Have you ever had something that happened and then you and your friends or family, your coworkers, you say, years from now we're going to laugh about this? Charlie Chaplin and Mark Twain both have been quoted as saying humor is tragedy plus time. Joel Goodman, who's the founder of the Humor Project and one of my early teachers, suggests that if we know that we're going to laugh at this eventually, maybe we can start now. Now, sometimes it's too soon, but when you're superhuman powered, you start laughing sooner and you laugh more often. I was raised in a tradition that urges us to examine every negative event or experience in order to look for the possible, not immediately apparent lesson, which, when we find it, will be to our great advantage. Now, there is something to think about. In fact, it was our tendency to take that approach that led my wife Pam and I to independently arrive at the same lesson that can be drawn from the sudden, unexpected loss of loved ones. That lesson: don't postpone joy. You may have heard variations of that as carpe diem. The poet said, gather ye rosebuds while ye may. The philosopher says, strike while the iron is hot. And Mark Twain said, life is uncertain, so eat your dessert first. And that has become one of our favorite practices. The insight was so powerful for me that I wanted to share it with others. And subsequently, I became known as the joyologist. I figured that the world might not need another psychologist, but probably could use a joyologist. For profound loss came profound understanding, and the seeds were planted for a career in humor and laughter. And I've grown that into a garden of delights, and I invite you to participate. Come into the garden. And from this garden, I can say, carpe the heck out of this diem. And I can also say, I am yours in love and laughter.